you're gonna, and if it's owner, I think I don't know, you tell me, if it's an owner occupied seller finance situation, doesn't it with a regular old buyer, doesn't it need to be 5-year minimum? It can be less if it's LLC purchase or an investor purchase or something.
Are you talking about like the seller qualifying for another loan and this mortgage not counting towards her liabilities?
I'm talking about Dodd-Frank. And doesn't Dodd-Frank have some sort of rule with minimum loan term in regards to an owner occupied property? If, as opposed to if it's a rental property, then the loan term doesn't have any rules. But if it's an owner occupied seller financed property, isn't the minimum required with a regular buyer name, not an LLC, isn't the minimum loan term supposed to be 5 years? Do you know?
I have never heard about that.
It's a Dodd-Frank rule.
Okay, so just to be clear, are you talking about the contract between the seller and the person who's buying the house on a wrap mortgage? Or are you talking about how selling the house, seller financing would affect the seller in getting another loan?
What did you say? Seller financing the house and what?
So is that rule that you're mentioning, is that related to the contract between the seller and the buyer who's going to buy the house on the seller financing or the wrap mortgage? Or are you talking about the seller's ability to get another loan after selling this house on seller financing?
I'm talking about not number two, not their ability, but just a Dodd-Frank legislation rule, I think, that's in place for the contract in between a seller financed house and a buyer of an owner occupied home. Because I'm sure you're going to tell me you can solve that the seller can qualify for a new loan if there's 12 months of on-time payments in like for a loan servicer.
Correct. So if it is less than 12 months, then the seller can just provide like the rental agreement, and then 75% of that can be used. But if it is more than 12 months, then the borrower will need to provide bank statements showing that someone else other than them has been making the payments for 12 months and that the borrower doesn't own the property anymore. And then it can be removed from their liabilities and it wouldn't count towards their DTI. But as far as
are we talking about seller financing or selling with sub 2?
Either or. Like the rule for like conventional loans.
So for wraps and sub 2s, we're talking for wraps and sub 2s, as long as
so as long as the borrower doesn't own the property anymore and they can show that someone else has been making the payments for 12 months, then it can be removed from their liability and it would not count towards their DTI.
Is that all lenders or only some lenders that you know about?
That's conventional loans. So these are the rules for Fannie and Freddie. So all lenders should be able to do the same.
So in regards to the 12 months of payments, getting it off the seller's ability to buy a new home, is there also a down payment minimum requirement then well, I guess that doesn't matter. I'm mixing two things up. Okay.
No, it doesn't. But if the seller, so like if the seller now going to be a borrower is wanting to buy a house, if they qualify to be like a first-time home buyer, so they haven't owned a home in the last 3 years, then they can buy with a conventional loan with like 3% down. But if they do not qualify for that, then it will be 5% down is what the minimum down payment would be. And the loan limits have been increased so that in King, Snohomish, and Pierce, it is almost $1 million. So people can buy a house almost $1 million and put only 3% down for first-time buyers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I am trying to get this house sold The best scenario for a buyer, right? Because yes, it's whatever is good for the seller. The best scenario for a buyer, like just trying to fit somebody's payment stream, I guess, like you said, unless she's willing to do that straight over tackle with you know, her underlying mortgage being 3.25%, right? At, let's say I want to get 750 for this house. Her underlying mortgage is 637 at 3.25%, right? So technically, if somebody puts 15% down, they can just assume that loan with covering all the costs that are involved with excise tax and broker commissions and stuff like that, assuming there's another broker involved, right?
Yeah.
Alternatively, if somebody doesn't have 15% down, which I'm saying is the challenge, because I've already put it out there like that, right?
Yeah.
That the solution would be to do a wrap or to do a seller finance second.
Correct. So either a wrap or a seller finance second, or even a lease option.
Lease option, true, right? So I've got that out there as well.
But it would be better for the seller to do the wrap than a seller finance second, because then the seller would still be receiving the payment from the buyer and making the payment themselves to the mortgage company. So they are they're keeping up with what's happening with the loan, and they are still the one who are dealing with the servicer instead of passing that on to the buyer to deal with it.
You mean in case the buyer fails?
In case the buyer fails, or there is a delay or late or something, then the wrap is better for the seller in that regard. Right.
So as an investor, you never want to buy on a wrap, but as a seller, you want to sell on a wrap.
Yeah, actually, like buying on a wrap would also be fine, because most likely there is going to be a servicer who is going to be collecting the payment from the buyer and then sending a portion to pay the mortgage payment and then sending the other portion to the seller.
Right. I guess my point of saying that was if the seller wanted to charge 6% instead for the wrap instead of 3.25%, you wouldn't want to be the buyer. Like investors want to split that apart, right, on the purchase. We're talking about two separate things here, but yeah.
So we're talking about kind of like the interest rate. But if you're able to negotiate the interest rate to be the same, like what it is on the original note, then it wouldn't really make a difference. Yeah.
Maybe what I might have her do, this seller, is talk to you. Maybe I'll have her consult with you. Sorry, guys, we're doing this. So she can get comfortable on the fact that she could purchase a property in 2 years, you know, even if she did the wrap. And of course, she was qualified to do so at that time.
Yeah, she'll just need like to get 12 months. And this would need to be like when I purchase a property subject to, I put this in the contract to make the seller feel better, saying that if the seller needs to purchase another home, then I would provide them with the most recent 12 months of my bank statements showing that I have been making the payment. And I showed the sellers kind of like the loan guidelines showing that's what they would need to be able to remove this from their liabilities, and it wouldn't affect their DTI, and it helps.
When you purchase a property as an investor subject to, are you not paying it through a loan servicer? Are you paying it direct?
So far, I have been paying it directly.
Just more so because the sellers are not sophisticated enough to understand it'd be better for them to have you pay it to a loan servicer?
It doesn't even come up, so I just keep it simpler. And I open a new bank account for the new property, and then I just have the rent go into that bank account and the mortgage payment coming out of that bank account.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's boy, that's a good person to have on your team right there, guys. Somebody that's a third party that can give assurance to a seller who's in the position of wanting to buy a house, right? Because, you know, that can be a roadblock for sellers who would otherwise maybe say yes to some type of sub two or seller financed, second position, right?
And if anybody needs like any of this information, I would be happy to send them like the portions of the guidelines that talk about
Hey,
these
Terry,
things.
how's it
So
going?
we can share it with the sellers.
Yeah.
Good.
We can hear you, Ian. Yeah. So, okay, cool. I have all the components working for me on this particular property. Aside from there's a big repair that needs to be made, but she'll have to deal with that. So I'm determined to get this done. It doesn't pencil for like a investor purchase though, right? So it has to be a regular old buyer purchasing it.
Have you tried kind of like sharing the listing on like the real estate agent Facebook groups? Because sometimes like people, even though it is listed on the MLS, sometimes like people don't see that it is assumable at 3.25%.
Yeah.
And then sharing that, like there is that Facebook group, the Northwest MLS licensed agents.
What's it called? Facebook group called Northwest MLS.
Yeah, Northwest MLS licensed agents, I think. Here, I'll take a screenshot of it and send it to you.
I mean, I've had some action on it, but it was either they wanted too low of a price or they didn't, I'm trying to get over this down payment issue, which is what we pretty much just solved if she would be agreeable.
Yeah.
Because
I think that
out there as assumable, it's the down payment that's been in the way. And then, okay, this is good. So, I might have you speak with her if you're
sure.
Sweet. All right. Well, that's all my problems. See you guys later. Good to see you. No, I'm just kidding. How's everybody doing? Hi, Dion. Nice article.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's always fun when they call because they do like a forensic deep dive into your accounting to make sure that they don't get misquoted on something. And it's stricter than getting a loan. The stuff that we want. So yeah.
That was in that article. Am I talking about that? We talking about the same thing? You
Business
did not
Insider?
have a beard.
Business Insider?
You didn't have your goatee.
The picture that they used, yeah. It's the headshot from the first one that they did like a year ago.
Oh, okay. I'm like, he's shaved. And then here you are. I'm like, what? Is that fake, Dion? You put it back on.
I just put it back on, exactly.
Yeah, you put it back on.
My Santa suit.
I got a question for Alex. So Alex, if somebody needed to extend their, let's say you got a flipper that's having trouble getting their property sold, right? How long would you guys be willing to extend if they paid you an extension fee? Like what would be, is that possible to do for like 18 months or is that not?
Are you talking about like taking a hard money loan and extending it like an extra until they can figure out?
Yes, if they paid you like an extension fee.
So we'll usually do, we'll usually do like a 3 to 6 month extension. If a borrower feels that they're going to need longer than that, we'll ask them to just refinance the loan at that point.
And what if they can't?
If they can't refinance,
but they can make the payment. Let's say they can continue to make your payment, but they can't qualify for refinance to take you out, but they have another solution that.
So we can potentially do like another short-term bridge refinance. If they got the loan at really high leverage, we might ask them to pay down to like deleverage the loan a little bit to pay down the balance a bit. But if they're in a situation where like they're going to need to like it,
I mean, they shouldn't be ideally should not be in a high leverage situation, right? Unless they've got private money on there.
Ideally, no, but like we've seen situations, right, where like a borrower gets a first from us and then later on, and we don't know about it until they come to us, they put a second on the property and then it's like, okay, now you're really highly leveraged. You're gonna need to delever that. You're gonna need to bring that from like 95% LTV down to like 80, 85, something like that.
Okay.
Alternatively, right, like if they can't refinance, I'd be asking them why. Like, is it because their credit's bad? Is it because they're like, what's the situation why they can't refinance, because we can do like short-term loans, we can do long-term loans for most situations, as long as the property is like still either being rented or if there's still like some kind of active plan in place on it.
Well, I mean, oops, this guy's calling me. How would if they can't qualify for regular financing, right, to take you out, what is it that's more easygoing about your terms, or is it the fact that, that allows you to refinance? What's the give?
Well, okay, so the reason why like a borrower wouldn't qualify for, say, a conventional refinance, right, would be maybe because of credit, right, or because of condition of the property, right? Those are usually the two reasons.
And in a flip case, it's probably credit, right?
Well, in a flip case, I would say it's usually the condition of the property, right? Because like, if the property's in like C5 condition or something like that, you're not going to get a conventional loan. We don't really mind that. Like we can do like, basically, if we did the bridge loan initially, like the hard money loan initially, we would probably just do a refinance, bring their interest rate up to like whatever the current interest rate is, and maybe charge them like, like 1 point, 1.5 points or something to refinance the loan with us into a new 12-month note or a new 18-month note. And it'd still be a bridge loan, it'd still be a hard money type loan. We'd still have like a renovation component in there built into the loan. But unless their credit has severely deteriorated in the time since they took the loan, it's usually not too big of a deal to get that refinanced.
Okay. Osama,
why is that borrower not able to qualify for a loan, for refinance?
Me?
No,
I'm just talking a hypothetical, right?
Yeah, because there are, like, if someone doesn't qualify to refinance, like to a conventional investment loan because of their DTI income, then there are the DSCR loans, and the ratio can go down to like 0.75. So like their mortgage payment can be 1,000 and their rent can be 750, and they would still qualify for a loan. And there are even products that wouldn't really care what the ratio is at all. So there are options, and it definitely will be, well, the nice thing about it is that it is a long-term loan. So it might, like the higher the risk, the higher the rate. So like if the issue is the rent is going to be too low compared to what the mortgage payment is, which is going to affect the interest rate. But at the same time, it's going to be a 30-year loan versus getting like 3-month or 6-month extensions at a time and not knowing if the lender is going to agree to the next extension or not.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, if the property is still in a condition where it's like mid-flip or something like that, I mean, those situations always kind of suck, because if the flip has been allowed to go on that long, then usually something's gone wrong. And the hope at that point is, does the borrower have the ability to bleed a little bit, like, deleverage the loan, like pay an extra 5% down of the principal or something, to make the loan conform with like the current lending environment. And if they can't do that, like if they're out of money, if they don't have the ability to refinance into conventional, they don't have the ability to, and the property's like mid-flip, so you can't refinance into a long-term loan like a DSCR or bank statement-based loan, then they're just in trouble at that point, because they're basically out of all options.
Yeah. Are you guys what are you seeing in your office, Alex? Are you seeing flips are still getting done, or are people starting to have trouble?
People are still finishing up their flips. I would say the people that are most getting in trouble are like those newer borrowers that were able to borrow much higher leverage, or that went into properties, with like really tight margins. Like they got into a property at the beginning of the year, or late last year, and now their renovations are finishing up and the property's sitting for longer than they expected, because they built the assumption around, I don't know, sale price of 500, and now they're getting a sale price of like 450, 425, and they're like, oh, I'm going to lose money if I do this. And I mean, just the market is what it is. You gotta deal with it sometimes.
Yeah, true that. Unless you're smart like Daniel and you buy them, right, Daniel?
Yeah, I suppose, yes.
Right on, right on. Well, what else? Dion, what's going on in your world?
Just enjoying the retired life, trying to figure out how to drag people into it, kicking and screaming. Seems like everybody just wants to work forever. It's so hard.
Yeah.
Harder than I thought it would be to convince people that you don't have to work, that it's not.
What's, are you making offers? How's it going on that front?
Yes, I made a couple, I think 5 offers in the last month. Had one accepted, pulled out, had way more work than I thought it was going to do. It was a rising water level that was impacting septic, so you had to tie into sewer, and then it was going to impact foundation. So it was just more than I wanted to deal with. I kind of like to invest the lazy way, where I've never done a rehab. Right? I've painted, put in flooring, or paid people to do that kind of stuff, not me. But I've never done cabinets. I've never done, new plumbing to add bedrooms or bathrooms or whatever. So this was my first one that was going to have work, and I thought, I could totally do what it had in the listing. And then once it was accepted, I went and looked at it. So I didn't pay for an inspection. I just went and walked the property and then pulled out. I was in my inspection period, so I didn't lose my earnest money or anything. But I'm still hunting.
How have things changed on the multifamily hunt in this environment?
So the big shift is, and I might have said this here before, was for the last couple of years, it was speed. Like, get an offer in as quick as possible. You have hours so that you try to get your offer in, get it accepted before the seller realizes they're going to get so many offers and so many over asking offers, waiving contingencies. And I'm not doing that anymore. I literally have my searches.
Slam in an offer at full price with an inspection.
Full price, or 5,000 or 10,000 over, and then try to negotiate later once we were under contract. And that worked since 2018. Every deal I came in was either at asking or a little above, and then we settled a little bit below. This year it's watch what's on the market. And in our area, 2-3 days was kind of the limit. And now, so my searches are everything that's on the MLS more than 10 days. And then I'm making like 80% offers. And that was the one I got accepted, was at 80%. And even if I went back and said, no, cut my offer in half, I probably wouldn't have taken the deal because of the amount of work needed. But that's what I'm doing now, is just watching time on market and then going to make an offer that makes sense to my math, not anything that the seller is expecting probably. And most people will probably just not take it, right? But I'll find the ones like I did that they were just happy to get somebody who was going to take it until I saw the amount of work that was there.
And is that sitting on the market a function of interest rates or dropping rents, or why is that?
So people were watching house prices go up on a trajectory like this for the last 2 years. And in their mind, they thought, okay, so if the prices get to here, I would totally sell this place. That makes sense. It's better than the return I'm getting, whatever reason they were going to sell it. And then interest rates hit, buyers pulled back. They're not getting all the offers they expected. So they're not lowering prices. I mean, I just did a Facebook post in One Rental at a Time where this seller listed a property, said, if we don't get an offer by January 15th, we'll just pull it off the market. So those are the people that are out there too. They're not a motivated seller. They don't have a reason to sell. They're not relocating, didn't change jobs, didn't have another kid, didn't get a divorce, didn't have all these things where they have to sell, didn't lose their job. They just thought for enough money, it would make sense to sell my property. So now it sits on the market. The statistics here in Washington, you probably have access to this. Listings are up like 600%, but new listings are down. So the listing increase is that the properties that are on the market are sitting on the market longer, but median home price is up still. We haven't dropped. It's people will pull it off. The goal is to find enough properties where they've been sitting on the MLS long enough to make enough offers. So your agent has to understand and communicate clearly. I told my agent exactly why I'm doing this. He's also an investor and he understood, so that they're not making offers that they know aren't going to get accepted. I explained, this is how long it's been on. This is what makes sense. And then find the person who has had the big life change where they have to sell and will negotiate. They probably won't take your 80% offer, but somewhere in the middle, that'll make more sense with high prices and high rates and rents kind of not catching up yet, but still working that way. I haven't seen rent decreases either that I keep seeing articles for. I just had Dana, the CEO of Hemlane, on my channel a couple of weeks ago. 18,500 units on their platform, 3,000 owners, not one lease renewal at a lower amount. So a
Interesting.
lot of the articles we're seeing are the same thing with home prices. People projected, I think I can get this in rent. Let it sit for a while, and then they lower the rent to what made sense. It's still higher than what it was before. It's just not as high as they were hoping for.
Right.
Yeah.
Semantics. Right.
Exactly.
Well, who is selling? That's what I'm saying. I'm interested, who's selling. I wanted to do like have the agents on my team call every listing in West Seattle that just sold or that's listed and ask that agent why that seller is selling. Like, what is the common denominator?
I would love to have that information too.
Right.
That would be great to put on YouTube.
It would be great. It would be great. So what about you? Anybody else? Anybody have any questions? There's Kevin. Hi, Kevin. And Cecilia.
Yeah, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Dion, what loan are you using, or how are you approaching financing without your W-2 now? Are you offering like mostly seller financing or?
So I make two offers. The first one is seller financing, and I have my little email that lists out all the benefits for the seller, that the agent's going to get their fee covered with my down payment, like really spelt out. And then I make it conventional. And so, yes, without a W-2, it's kind of challenging to get a mortgage. But once you have rental income for 2 years, then I'm still able to get, because I don't have 10 mortgages in my name. I only have 7 properties and 6 have a mortgage and one's paid off. So I could still go up to 10. The lenders I work with have said we have no problem with your rental income because they take depreciation out. So even though it looks like I had an $8,900 loss last year, on paper with depreciation out, I made $128,000. So I'm still bankable for the next property. And they will still consider leases of the property I'm purchasing as long as the majority, which they never defined, so I'm guessing more than 50%, but the majority of my current tenants have more than 3 months remaining on their leases. So short-term rentals wouldn't help me and month-to-month wouldn't help me, but having year-long leases with more than 3 months left and having consistent rental income for it's been over a decade, but more than 2 years is what they were looking for. They've basically said I can borrow any amount of money on any property as long as I can save the down payment. Down payment for an investment is going to be 20 or 25%. So I'm not doing like a 5% down conventional on a small multifamily or anything. I'm still doing a decent sized down payment. But they haven't balked at all without the W-2. They said, we haven't considered your W-2 for 3 or 4 years.
Gotcha. And what are the interest rates that you're seeing for like 2 to 4 units?
Last quote was 6 or low 6s. But that was, I think when I did that, it was about a month ago. So
what are you seeing? What do you say, Osama?
What's that?
Where I can ask Osama, we got a lender on here to tell us today's rates.
Yeah, is it for an investment property or a primary?
So investment, small multifamily, not owner occupied.
Yeah, it's probably going to be in the 6s, but it also depends on if you're paying points or not. And this is probably with points. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to buy down points because I buy and hold forever. Don't plan on ever selling. Don't ever gamble on refinancing in the future. I figure it's going to be the rate I'm going to have forever, so I always buy it down.
Yeah.
So I probably that would have been the bought down rate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think there's an opportunity in today's market? I know on the residential side that it's better for you to, instead of get that full price reduction, use part of that money towards buying the rate down from the seller rather than a price reduction?
So, right. So once you're under contract, I wouldn't start the conversation that way, but once you're under contract and you get the inspection done and you have some negotiating power with things you want repaired, you can say, look, instead of a price reduction to take care of these issues, how about you buy down my rate? Right. But I wouldn't open the conversation that way. You want to seem as attractive as possible until they have that sunk cost theory going on that they've accepted your offer. Now you're in negotiations to get to the closing table.
You're saying you're making your offer lower. You're making your offer lower from the get-go, right? 80%.
No, I'm making my offer so I'm making like an 80% offer. I would still try to negotiate that one. It wasn't the one I got pulled out of, wasn't even worth negotiating. Like I said, we could have cut my price in half and I still wouldn't have bought it because of the amount of work that was needed. Like it's literally changing the layout of the property because of the water problem. But that's the idea, is I get it under contract with a lower offer currently. If it's been on the market, the one I closed on last year, I made asking price offer on the MLS. Right. So I wasn't, and then I negotiated like $2,500 off later. I bought down the rates because we weren't where we are now. Last year, I don't think sellers would have bought down rates. They had too much demand.
Right.
The demand's not there this year. So you have the ability to say, here's the other things I would like you to do.
Osama, what are you seeing? You're out buying. Are you off like a kid in a candy store right now?
Well, I was taking a vacation recently, so I just got back. But on the lending side, I have been seeing buyers getting a lot of seller concessions, like $20,000-$30,000 in seller concessions to buy down the rate, to get the 2-1 buy down to cover all closing costs. I just had last week a closing for a VA loan where the seller credit was enough to pay off all closing costs, buying down the rate, and still have some money left over that were used to pay off a HELOC that the borrower had.
Yeah.
No,
Nice.
there are definitely opportunities out there.
There definitely are. Right. I think there's some key nuggets of information. So let me ask you, I want to ask you something about what am I thinking here? When somebody is in second position, right? Like a second position, a seller that goes into second position because of the equity, right? You can assume their underlying loan or something like that, but there's enough equity there that your down payment would be too big, just like we've been talking about, right? And the seller's willing to go in second position with some seller financing, but they're worried about being in second position as opposed to first position, right? Isn't there some sort of deed? I heard I think it was like Pace Morby or one of those guys, something like that, Jerry Norton, one of those guys, talk about a performance deed when the seller is offering a seller financing second position, that if you miss your payment, you can define what that means. If you miss 1 payment, 2 payments or whatever, that there's like a performance deed that they get that it'll automatically, I don't know, the word automatically is a big word, but transfer to the seller's name if a payment's missed, the seller who's in second position, to try and overcome their concern about being in second position. Have you heard this?
No, I haven't, but some of these things that some people mention, because there are differences among states. So some things that people talk about, it might work for another state, but it might not work here. I have not heard that before in Washington, and this probably would be a good question for an attorney regarding the deeds, or a title company attorney. They would be the ones who would know more about that, but I haven't run into that before.
Right. So, I mean, I think instead of the idea being, instead of that seller who's in second position getting wiped out by some default language or some high interest rate, right? Because the borrower defaults, that they end up with the property in their name again, so they can cure that problem. Right.
Well, it sounds like that would be kind of circumventing foreclosure, which I am not aware of any way to do that on an owner-occupied property in Washington.
I guess
Because
that is protecting your right, just protecting your position. So instead of getting right for a seller, right, and is that considered circumventing foreclosure?
Yeah, because if someone owns a property and they default on the loan, then it would have to be foreclosure, because there are kind of 2 different types of states. There is states that will have judicial or non-judicial foreclosures, and Washington, the way that Washington is set up for foreclosures is you have to go through the foreclosure process. You cannot just write something in the contract that would give the property back to the owner without having to go through the foreclosure process, as far as I know. So if the seller is worried about that, then doing the lease option would probably be the better thing for them, because then they would remain on title and then they would just need to evict versus going through the foreclosure process.
Right. I'll have to look into what these guys are talking about. This is it's true that you hear all these guys, these whoever they are, talking about all these structures, and you're like, really? I mean, I've never heard of that before. I just picked up on it this morning, and I'm like, I believe he just said that he provides some sort of, this is Pace Morby, provides some sort of specific performance deed like that in second position to the, and I'm like, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and some of the things that like some people mention, they don't exactly mention all the details. Like one thing that Pace talks about with the subject to is once you have a subject to and you're going to use a servicing company, then the seller can immediately go and get another property, and that liability will be removed from their DTI. And that is not true. You either have to wait full 12 months and show the statements showing that someone else has been making the payment, or provide the lease agreement and then use 75% of that. So some of the things that they mention, it is not.
Provide what lease agreement? You don't own the property anymore because you sold it sub 2.
Yeah, but let's say, for example, that you own a property and you use a property manager, and the property manager rents out the property. The lease agreement is not going to have your name as the owner, it's going to have the property manager's name. So the landlord is going to be the property manager, and the tenant is going to be whatever tenant that is. But because of the address, it's the same address for that property, then you're able to use it. Gotcha. So it's kind of like similar. So if the buyer if the buyer is an investor and they're going to rent the house, then you can use that lease agreement, and it would you would be able to use 75% of the rent from that. And that's what
so there's a little distinction you just said. If the buyer who bought it subject to is an investor who leases it.
Yeah.
The seller who sold it subject to can use that lease.
Yeah, and 75% of that would be used to offset the liabilities. And that's what can be used right away. But
as long as it's proven that tenant has paid.
Yeah, some lenders will require receiving kind of like a copy of the security deposit and maybe even the first month rent. And some lenders might not be as detailed.
Right. So do you use subject to, Osama? Do you like subject to deals, or do you feel that they're something terrible about them?
Yeah, I love them. I own 3 properties that I bought with subject to, and the interest rates range between 2.25 and 3.
And then what'd you do for the equity portion behind that? Did you put it down, or did you?
Well, all 3 didn't have much of equity because they had recently, right before I bought from them, they had done cash out refinances. So they had already pulled most of the equity out. And because I was buying off market, then I was like, okay, this is what you get on market. This is how much you would pay in broker fees. So let's take that off. And then this is how much repairs will need to be done. So I just end up like paying out the equity, but it's not that much compared to the house price, and also the fact that they didn't need to get a loan.
And it's still penciled as a rental.
Yeah.
Even though they maxed out their loan amount, kind of.
Yeah, because that translated to me having to come out of pocket with less money to buy it.
Okay, gotcha. Right, makes sense.
And then again, the rate was less than like 3% or lower, so it was a very good deal for me. Yeah. Right.
So the clincher being obviously the rate, but obviously the fact that you're in for it for very low cash in.
Yeah. Now I need to do the same with multifamily, like bigger multifamily properties like apartments.
I mean, so ideally what we're talking about is you can buy the prettier, nicer properties, right? Depending if you can find one that has the low rate and is, you can put low money down, right? I mean, I think everybody, thinks about having to buy properties, that are, further out, or, to make them pencil, but it's sort of a advantage these days. It's like a different lane with these low interest rates that you can buy subject to, right? It kind of changed the ability to buy nicer properties, right? With the low interest rate.
Yeah, the key is to finding properties that have little to no equity in them, and the sellers need to sell. And with some sellers, they would need to come out of pocket to sell the property. So they're selling the house, they're not getting any money, and they're actually having to pay money out of pocket to cover closing costs and broker fees to be able to sell. So these would be kind of like the optimal properties to find for subject to.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm looking to do the same with apartments. So if that's kind of like what I'm starting to work on, is how to find apartments in that situation where the sellers don't have much equity and I can take over them.
How are you doing that? Are you pulling a list off of something somewhere, or you're going to contact them directly, or are you just looking for properties that are listed in that situation, or what, or wholesalers or whatever?
Well, this is when I'm going to be starting. So I'm just going to be pulling like lists from title companies and skip tracing them and contacting sellers and seeing what I find. Yep.
I was, I worked for like the concierge partner, or I ran a bunch of lead for some of these big, I still do, for some of these big investors. And a couple years ago, I was working for working with a big investor out of Denver. And what I would do is I would track every single lead they sent me that they got off market. I would look at the status of the loans, and I would look at the status of, the deeds and all that stuff. And it was very, like, every single property, I'd say out of 100, 90 or 95 had a quit claim in those leads that these investors were buying. Or they had, or they had like a low dollar second loan, like a loan for $25 to $75, $100,000 as a second on the property was the common denominator.
Yeah, it's a lot more common in commercial properties versus residential to find these quit claim deeds and the second mortgages.
These are all residential, These are all residential properties.
Oh, I meant, like, do you mean like they were like single family homes or 5+?
Single family homes.
Okay.
I was trying to find the common denominator of, the sellers, right? Just like how Dion and I were just saying, like, hey, I want to call everybody in town and find out why they're selling. Like, what's the common denominator of who's selling right now? Because who's going to sell a property that they have a low interest rate on, right? So it's either going to be people relocating or tired landlord for some reason, or, some of the same, factors as always. But I found that interesting that 90% of the properties on single family properties the investors were purchasing or getting under contract or getting leads on had a quit claim involved, right? So then I just started pulling lists, but then that gets to be a problem, because then you're talking about marriage stuff. It's, and things like that. There's a lot of reasons why there is a hard list to zero down on, I guess I'd say.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kevin, what's going on with you guys over at Sunday? Lead flow up, down, buyers up, down. What's going on? What are the stats?
So leads are definitely down. In part, it's because we're going more to an outbound model versus inbound. Budget reasons, as most companies are going through right now. So there's kind of an adjustment period going on there, but we're kind of switching the model to having, agents bring some of the lead flow in, as they're starting to see some properties that might not be great fits for the MLS. So we're doing that. And so, I'd say we're down lead flow, but we're up in quality, I'd say. So there's that going for us, and still having some action, but given that it's getting closer and closer to Christmas, offers are definitely starting to go down.
I'm working with some other, some investor types that spend a lot on marketing as well. And I am their novation partner. Do you guys know what that means?
Novation. I think we've heard it before.
Basically, they put it under contract, and instead of wholesaling it, they give it to me to list. But I don't list it as a wholesale deal. I list it as a regular old retail property that a retail buyer could buy with a loan. And novation is an agreement that, they're using it when investors are using it when the properties don't pencil as investor priced properties, but there's still a big enough discount. The seller's still willing to take a large enough discount that there's a spread. It's essentially like a net listing with a bunch of legal paperwork handling the middle portion of that. So it looks like a regular old listing. You wouldn't know there's an investor involved in the middle of it. And it fills a niche. It's a little messy. I'd say I'm having to coach these guys through, the fact that there's an actual retail listing transaction happening, right? They like to try and shove things through as investors, and you can't quite do that the same when there's a listing involved, but it can be much more lucrative for them than just wholesaling the deal, because it's like wholetailing. It's like a legal way to wholesale the deal. So I've been deep in the weeds on that. I actually have a appointment right after this that I'll call it as a novation listing. So it's already under contract with an investor, and I'm going down there to essentially get it ready to throw on the market. The sellers know that that's a potential exit strategy, and they are basically just willing to take a net number, right? It's not as easy as that sounds, but that's the premise of it. And that is something that some of the biggest investors out there, are doing these days as a way to increase their spreads. And I'm doing it out of state. So working on one out of state in, let's say there's one we have in North Carolina, and the investors have it under contract for, we'll say $180,000 on an ovation agreement. And we went in there. I brought an agent in there from North Carolina, went in, and the investor spent like $5-6 grand cleaning out the place, and then listed it for sale and got a $260 offer. Right. So the investor has to pay all the commissions and the excise tax and all that stuff and the cleanup fees. So you have to reverse engineer into a spread. Right. And then the underlying seller gets a net number, and the investor takes everything above that. Right. I'm trying to help them perfect the process, because they're treating it very investor like, where, there's a retail component to it that requires very clear steps and, processes, right? So trying to mash the two together has been, I'll say it's been fun, but it's been a little challenging. But it does fill a niche of a type of seller, right? Who doesn't want to go down to a investor type price, and they don't want to list it for sale themselves, because why wouldn't they just go list it for sale themselves? Right? Instead, they grant the power of attorney to the investor to sign the listing paperwork on their behalf. There's a bunch of documents and legal stuff involved. And I'm the only person in eXp Realty in Washington that's allowed to do this. So any agent that tries to do that or works with investors, they have to include me, and they have to co-list it with me so I can keep the bumpers on for them. So that's kind of a cool spot to be in. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Novation. Oh, Osama, do you know what that is?
Yes. Yeah.
You and me, we need to go grab a coffee, but you're in Olympia. When are you coming up this way?
I'll probably be up there on Tuesday.
On Tuesday next week?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to track you down.
Cool. Sounds good.
What part of town are you going to be in?
I'm going to be in Seattle.
Okay. Well, I'm in Ballard. Are you going to be anywhere near Ballard, or I'll come to where you are? Let's set up a time to meet. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'll text you.
Well, networking right in front of you guys.
Yeah.
So what else? Anybody else have questions? You could do that with apartment buildings. You could do that with anything, right? What I just said.
Yeah.
It's basically a net listing. I wouldn't, brokers in Washington, just for the record, are allowed to do net listings. Like, you're allowed to do it. The MLS made the rule change. And I called them up and I go, why did you do that? why did you change that rule? Because everybody hates net listings. And they said because of all the NAR lawsuits and everything like that, where you can't tell people what to do or put restraints on anybody. And if somebody wants to do something stupid, like, you know, a novation, the seller, you can't tell them, the MLS can't tell us no, or can't tell that seller no. And so they changed the rule on net listings that are now not prohibited. But I, as an agent, wouldn't want to do a net listing because it's bad PR, kind of. I don't think I would want to do that, but I don't mind doing it on behalf of somebody else. So I'm looking for novation partners is basically what I do, right? So I might have deals that I come across where they don't want to list it and they won't take a investor price. So instead of me doing a novation myself, I would take it to my novation partner who's an investor, and I would have them be on the paperwork, and then I would just be the agent listing it. Instead of right now, they're all bringing me their novation deals. I can do the same. I can come across those leads and go give it to them, and I can get my fees to be higher, right? So instead of getting my regular commission, which is what it is on a novation, I could share in the profit, because I'm bringing them a deal just to put their name on the paper. No money even out of their pocket, right? So pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more opportunities for things like this as things slow down more and less buyers are in the market.
Right. Everything that we're talking about here is so deployable right now, right? That's the thing, is everybody needs to get their ducks in a row and learn the lingo and learn how to speak modern real estate, as I call it, and deploy right now, because there's only a window, and what if it goes back where you can, 2 years ago, sellers don't want to listen to this as much unless it's like a specific situation where they're, have no equity, then, or, it's free and clear and you get those kind of seller finance. But now everybody's willing to listen to anything if you can make sense of it for them, right? That's what I find.
Yeah.
What else? Anybody else? What time is it? 12:24. Keith, how are you? You working with Holly still?
Hey, pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Holly's been great. I've been working with her for a while now, so she's fantastic. And we just put an offer on a house in Tacoma a couple weeks ago, but it turns out there's like 11 cash offers, so that one didn't work out. So we're on to the next one, but kind of in hunting mode right now. So yeah, she's been fantastic. So yeah. So hey, Dion,
are you on Sunday's platform?
I'm actually getting the Sunday emails. Yeah, Kevin and I have we synced up a while back. Yeah, so I'm reviewing some of those emails that I get in, some of those deals. So absolutely, yeah. So I'm looking in the Tacoma area though. I've narrowed that down as much. So
Alex, are you guys getting flip loans these days or more buy and hold loans?
I think more flip type loan, or flip loans, and also we're doing a decent number of just midterm bridge loans, like 18 months, 24 months, for folks that are like, look, I want to hold this property for at least another couple of years until we can sell it in a better climate, or until I can get it rented out, or until I can qualify my income and then get a conventional refi.
You're talking about the flippers who aren't liking the numbers where they're at right now or doing the bridge loans, right? Yeah. Right. And what's the rate on that, did you say, Alex, on those bridge loans?
I mean, for those bridge loans, we're doing most of them in the 10% to 12% range. Kind of depends on credit score, borrower experience. But yeah, that's
how does that pencil for them? How do they pay that payment at a 10 or 12% interest rate?
Most of them already have hard money on it. And at that kind of rate, it's not that different from what they're paying right now.
Okay, so it's just a real, it's not a change in rate, it's more just a change in the term of the loan, the length of the loan. So you have to get them off that hard money and you shift them over to the bridge, more so for term purposes, not rates and all that other stuff. It's just as expensive, right?
Yeah, and I mean, especially if the property is say it's rented out by the room, or say it's an Airbnb type property. A lot of times your monthly payments aren't the biggest concern. You're more like, okay, look, can I get financing to keep holding on to this property?
But Osama, let's talk about that situation right there. If some flipper is able to get a bridge loan from Alex, right?
Yeah.
And why couldn't they then go and do a lease option on that property where they're collecting an option fee that helps them pay whatever they might be short on rent or pay an extension fee or some sort of bridge loan fee. And then they've written their purchase price either gets to maintain where they originally wanted to get it to, because we're talking about a strike price down the road. Why wouldn't a lease option work for somebody in that situation? Osama, what do you think? For the seller, for the investor?
I guess it will just depend on what terms they can get for that bridge loan and what they would be able to get from that lessor.
But in a bridge loan, let's say they have to do the bridge loan because that's their only option, right? To extend their term, right, off their hard money. And a regular tenant, I guess, would be in there paying, their little deposit and whatever their market rent is, and you're paying for the maintenance the whole time. With a lease option, at least, maybe you can get a higher rent, but you're going to get an option fee, right? And you're going to have an idea of securing the price the reason why you're waiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I'm not really seeing a difference between doing a lease option versus just renting it normally.
You put the maintenance on the tenant buyer.
Yeah, I meant kind of like as far as like any restrictions on the owner to do a lease option. I don't think there would be any. I'm saying, why wouldn't you want to do a lease option if you're a bridge loan borrower? Because you're going to get an option fee. Yeah.
You could get a big option fee that either help you gap any shortfall between the payment and the market rent.
Mm-hmm.
Plus you can push all the maintenance off onto the tenant buyer. Plus you can get a purchase and sale agreement signed at the price that you've been holding out for, right? Because you're trading terms for maybe being able, if you thought you were going to be able to sell it for $850 and the market's down now to, $800 or $775. If you get an 18-month lease option, maybe you can still achieve that $850 price, right? Or get closer to it.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, but that would be applicable for any rental, like just renting a property in general versus just doing a lease option instead, right?
Well, how is doing a regular rental? Well, I guess I'm saying because you're going to collect an option fee, maybe the option fee, and you get to push the maintenance off on them. And the option fee might be able to help offset any rent shortfall or any loan fees.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to be able to get a good amount of money up front from the person who's going to be renting on the lease option.
Right. And then you have a tenant in there that's a tenant buyer that thinks they're buying it instead of a regular tenant who might beat the shit out of the place or not treat it as nicely. It's kind of like hedging your situation, I would think, a little bit.
I have a house in Tacoma right now that I was considering doing a lease option on. So this might be my first one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I how I'm doing it. Well, so I'm listing lease options as well. And I, am trying to get like a minimum of $30,000 an option fee, let's say, or 5% of the purchase price as an option fee. Whatever, that's kind of like the equation of like a maximum earnest money would be 5%, right? So brokers can get paid, splitting it a third. So 1/3 to a buyer's agent, 1/3 to me, 1/3 to the seller on the option fee. I mean, it's all negotiable, right? And I'm having people have interest in that sort of thing. So I think when you're an investor and you talk about lease options, you think about the option fee being very small as you could possibly get it. But when you're a broker and you're talking about option fees, you can actually talk about a much higher option fee, right? And I'm finding that people are willing to do that.
So when you do a lease option, do you list it on the MLS?
I certainly can list a lease option on the MLS.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the sale, it's still a sale, you know. The question is, you know, so I might put it on there at whatever price and say, contact me for, you know, seller financing available or flexible terms. But if somebody were to, I might want a higher price if somebody wanted to engage the lease option, right?
Yeah.
So
when you do a lease option, is there anything that gets recorded at the time of the lease?
Well, you're signing a purchase and sale agreement. You're talking about for what purpose? To protect who? Who are you trying to protect with that question?
Well, not necessarily like who to protect. I'm just not familiar with the process because I haven't done it before.
Yeah. So there would be a lease, a separate lease document, an option to buy agreement, and the actual purchase and sale agreement gets also signed, but it just doesn't get engaged until the tenant buyer exercises their option to buy, right? And so there could be a memorandum also recorded or something, but you actually are in escrow at that point with a signed purchase and sale agreement.
Do you get taxed on the option fee right away?
No, you get taxed, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not a CPA, but you get taxed on the option fee either at the time the option expires or when the option is exercised, to the best of my knowledge, as a non-CPA answer. So, and it's non-refundable, right? So technically you can spend it, even though it's not taxable that year, yeah. Right? And if they exercise the option to buy, then that option fee applies towards their down payment. So you're going to always pre-qualify that buyer and find out, well, what are the conditions where they're going to be approved for a loan or whatever, right? And make sure that a lender will accept the option fee as down payment money. But I think that can happen very easily. So they only lose it if they don't exercise the option to buy. If they exercise the option, it goes towards the down payment. So you can still spend it because it's just like a released earnest money.
I'm thinking of selling my park that way as a lease option. So that way I can do a 1031 exchange. Because if I do like seller financing, I don't think I can do a 1031 exchange with seller financing.
I don't think so. I have a reverse 1031 sale going on right now. So can you do a 1031 with a lease option? I would say no.
Why not? I mean,
well, because your option, your purchase and sale agreement is in a holding bucket. It's not actually engaged. It's not.
I was going to do the 1031 once they exercise the lease option.
Oh, gotcha.
But with seller financing, I can't do the 1031 because seller financing, I'm selling the property right away. So
why would you do that? Are you looking just for a runway? Are you looking for it to be, so you have a runway to go find more property to buy on your option period?
Because I like to travel to like Asia. So that way I can have it like a timing of, okay, they're going to exercise the lease option at this time. And two, people that want to buy my park, almost every one of them ask for seller financing. And I can say, instead of doing seller financing, I'll do a lease option and match the numbers of a seller financing deal.
Sure. But then you got to make sure in your lease option, because normally in a lease option, the buyer would be able to exercise that option to buy, whenever they want during the term of the lease. So you would need to add in language that says, that they have to give X amount of days notice, or that they can't exercise the option to buy until at some point, like, at month 12 or something like that. So you get your time that you're looking for.
Right. I put in that they need to give me I don't know, 6 months notice before they exercise the option. So that way I can be ready to do the 1031 exchange.
The other issue that you have there is that it has to appraise if they're getting a loan at the time they are going to purchase the property. There still needs to be an appraisal if they're putting a loan on there. So you don't want to have a variable. You're going to try and lock that down ahead of time, right? So what I would do is, try and have some sort of waterfall type of language in there, like if it appraises for less, or if it's $3 million and it appraises for 2.9 million instead of 3 million, the buyer and seller agree to this, right? So you're not having to know, your deal doesn't fall out of contract at the time that they exercise the option because the appraisal doesn't, match up to the purchase price that you are putting in place, a year and a half, 2 years ahead of time. Do you get what I mean?
Okay.
Because you're going to sign a purchase and sale agreement at the time you do the lease option. So you're going to
wouldn't that be the buyer's problem if it didn't, because if they don't close, they're going to lose their option fee. Let's say you need to put $500,000 down, and then if it doesn't appraise and you can't get financing, that's kind of on them, wouldn't it? Or not?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if there is some talk I've heard out there, like if the option fee is too high, then maybe like a court would consider it not a lease, that it would be more like you'd have to foreclose on them. But that would need to be discussed with an attorney, right? So I go with 5%. I try to get 5% on the option fees because that's the maximum liquidated damages on earnest money. So it's a number that's already out there, and it's easy for me to sort of use that as a starting point because it's already kind of an accepted percentage that has a legal rule around it. You get what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't gone to the attorney with this yet, but that's kind of what the direction I was kind of looking at and doing and going towards.
Yeah.
But we'd have to write up a contract and have it reviewed by the attorneys before I move forward on it.
And have it pre-inspected. You want to take everything. When I'm doing a lease option, I want to take every, as an investor, you might have different mindsets about stuff, but when I'm, depending on what side of the fence I'm on or whatever, I like to have the lease options where there's no negotiation at the time it goes to exercise the option to buy, that everything's already done, right? So there is nothing comes up to derail it.
Right.
So that means it's pre-inspected, right? It means that I've already pre-qualified somebody for the loan. Like I know they can get a loan if they accomplish a certain thing or whatever, get that bonus or have their bankruptcy or, whatever, that they're actually going to be qualified. There isn't, or we know what's in the way of them getting qualified for a loan, and we know we can accomplish that. That can be overcome during the term of the lease or whatever, right? Because you don't want to, especially for you're spending all this time looking for properties to buy, you sure don't want to, lose that opportunity, since they're not easy to find, by having your lease option deal fall apart. So you want it to be real tight on that purchase and sale agreement side.
Okay.
Unless you're happy with keeping that, $100,000 or whatever, if you can get somebody to give you that much money.
Oh, it'd be, I'm looking at least 500, maybe 500 to 700,000. So yeah, if they fall out, I'd be keeping that. If not, they'd be paying, I think I calculate to like around 17,000 a month. Instead of interest only, I'd call it lease payments. So
well, it'd be rent, right? But the problem for, the risk for the buyer on that point is that they've given you $500,000 and they hope that do you own it free and clear?
I don't.
Right. So the risk for them is, are you going to keep making your payment? Right. What if you screw up and they've given you that money, right? And my
payment is like less than 6,000 a month. So that 17,000 more than covers the 6,000 a month payment that I have to do.
Right. So maybe you'd make it payment through a loan servicer or something like that, right? So keeps everybody honest. So they pay the loan servicer pays you. And that way,
Yeah, whichever way. I might actually just pay off the loan because I owe like around 800,000. So if I pay the 800,000, then I can keep the extra 6,000 a month.
that sounds cool.
Yeah.
You do all this stuff with apartments too, Dion, right?
You
Cool.
could. You could also find ways to do it that are very simple.
You could, which is good, right? Yes,
Right.
Totally. Totally agree with that. All right, guys. Well, we are gone a little long today, so we will wrap it up. Good talking to you all. And Osama, hit me up. Let's get together and have a quick coffee. I won't hang out with you all day, but we can hang out for 30 minutes. I'll come wherever
Sounds good.
you're at. Convenient for you.
Okay.
Sound
Perfect.
good?
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
guys.
Good to see you all. Thank
See
you.
ya.
Bye.
Take care.
Nice to see you.